5 minutes.
We gotta get started. I don't think I revealed an assignment for this week. I keep track of which weeks I've done that and which weeks I haven't. They all blend together.
Also, exam grades haven't posted yet.
Have they not? Maybe they posted them but didn't reveal them. I'll go take a look at that. I thought I entered those. Okay, so there's that. I owe you a study guide by Friday for an exam next Friday. And other than that, we're still gathering some data. I've heard that a couple of people have done some good play tests on Harmony, which is good. If you have the opportunity, play a little bit more. That will only help us in the big picture when we're writing a paper on this at the end of the term. Last time, we ended up talking about trade-off relationships, and we were in the process of talking about different game systems that could use certain mathematical relationships in ways that were interesting or fun. And we determined that a lot of mechanics really could fit in many of these, but it would completely change how the rest of the game plays around that idea. If you have an exponential leveling curve, for instance, it either needs to end by level 10, or it needs some kind of dividing factor that means that you're gaining multiplicatively more and more experience to offset the exponential growth, which means that you will still level up slower, but the dividing by a multiplicative factor makes it a bit more bearable. But even that will only work up through level 20, level 30, and then the exponential will start to dominate the multiplicative benefit to your experience. So you need to offset. If you want something to be linear, but seem like it's growing exponentially, then you need to offset something exponential with something logarithmic. You need to have an understanding of inverse mathematical relationships. So if the experience to level up is growing exponentially, then you need the experience gain from level to level to be growing exponentially as well. And that will make it seem the same linear amount of time to level up, but it will seem like I'm getting more and more experience, but it's over the same amount of time. So ratios end up being very important here. How do you craft custom curves from this? So you want to utilize this for your own game in some capacity. Oftentimes, you don't want to just make a pure mathematical function for this to do that progression. And you can make piecewise functions, start following one function and then switch to following another function at some cap. So you start with exponential growth, and then from there, it levels out to polynomial, and from there it levels out to linear, or something of the sort that makes the... We'll go into this example. I'll blow this up so that you can actually see it. That is much bigger than it is on my screen. I think it's slightly small. So on the left, we have a pure exponential function. And you can see that by the time you reach level 20, you need much, much, much more experience than you did from level 1 to level 2. What is the ratio? How many more times, if you follow the straight exponential curve on the left, how many more times experience do you need to hit level 20 than you needed to hit level 2? So it was 100 experience to go from level 1 to level 2, right? So you need 260,000 times the experience in order to go from level 19 to level 20 that you did to go from level 1 to level 2. If you're fighting enemies that give the same amount of experience, or relatively the same amount of experience, it will take 260,000 times longer to hit level 20 than it did to hit level 2. If that is an intended part of your game, then great, you did it. For anyone else, 260,000 times any amount of time is too much. I don't know any players who are quite that hardcore trying to level from 19 to 20 that they're willing to put in 260,000 times the effort that it took to level to 2. So maybe it makes sense to smooth this exponential curve. How long are we purely exponential in the right-hand side?
Maybe up to like level 11. No.
Level 12, yeah. We're doubling up until level 12. How does it change after level 12? What is the mathematical relationship moving forward from 12?
It's like 1.5. Yeah, it looks like we're just going by like a half or something.
Yeah, so the difference between level 11 and level 12 is the same as level 12 and level 13. but then we're starting to multiply it by 1.5 each time. Instead of doubling, which is multiplying by 2, we're going to start multiplying by 1.5. It's still exponential, but it's less of an exponential curve. And that changes the requirements. By the time you hit level 20, it only takes 10% as much. 1/10 as much experience is required just by making that switch. It's still exponential, but changing the base of that at level 12 cuts out a factor of 10 from the grind for going from 19 to 20. So you have complete and total mathematical power over these ideas, but you also want it to be somewhat predictable. If the player recognizes that it's taking about twice as much experience to level on each level, you don't want to suddenly completely change that idea partway through the leveling curve in a way that is going to change the player's perception of the experience curve. This is going to be hidden enough from the player's perspective that they won't really notice that things have changed dramatically. But from a designer's perspective, 10 times less grinding to get from 19 to 20 is a positive effect on your game, most likely. So keep that in mind, that there's a balance between sticking to something mathematical and hiding it from the user to get the benefit that you want. And there are curves for this for everything from, oops, I apparently hit the perfect pixel. I was saying something. It's gone. We'll give you a case study here to hopefully hit this home. So in a game that you're in the middle of designing, or that you're in the middle of, you've been hired to balance, enemies all have 4 hit points, and you are designing skills that deal 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 damage. That is what the developer has told you you are able to do. So given that these skills can deal 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 damage, your job is to assign mana point costs to these skills. Don't worry about how much max MP a character has or something of the sort. Just care about the relative MP values. We can scale the mana values, what the maximum mana is, mana per level, etc. later. Just care about the relative MP costs of each of these skills, assuming that this is some kind of either turn-based game, something that when you decide to do something, the enemy gets to react.
So it's turn for turn.
Yeah. So there's a bit of value to a turn, but the relative costs to the scales of skills that do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 damage. Yeah.
And this whenever we're doing one skill is one enemy.
Yeah. Just for the moment. Yeah, these are single target. So just take out a piece of paper, think about it, and see if you can craft an interesting curve to these costs, keeping in mind that it costs a turn as well to do. What mathematical progression would make sense? Or a custom progression, totally fine. Yeah.
I think like 2, 4, and then like 8, 16, and then probably like double that again for like 32. And then anything that you need to like scale up or scale down, you can do later.
Okay, so starting kind of with a base exponential.
Very, very small.
Okay. Why? What makes you think that exponential is? I'm not saying that's bad. I'm curious for your reasoning for why a base exponential curve to that. From a player's perspective, why is that fun, interesting, a meaningful choice, a trade-off of some kind?
Well, once you start to get into the realm of actually like one-shotting something, like it would be most of your mana. So like, and if you're going to over one-shot something,
Yeah.
it should be like a significant chunk.
Yeah. So for instance, if you make it linear, then the cost of one-shotting an enemy in one turn is the same as taking 4 turns to do that same thing. And that's an obvious choice for the player. I would rather take the upfront cost and in one turn, one shot them so they're not attacking me 3 times while I am in the process of killing them. That's obvious. So we need to make the higher cost skills deal more or cost more in order to make that an interesting trade-off. Let's go 1 then 2.
Yeah, you're basically exchanging mana for health all the time, right?
Yeah,
If you one shot something, they can never attack you, which means you kill a lot more stuff.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you need to run out of something else first.
right. There is a trade-off there. You're absolutely right. That health is one of those. You're protecting yourself from being hit if you can cast a skill that does more damage, and the amount of time that the battle takes. If the battles go faster, then you can level up faster. So there's a time cost there as well.
I was about to say something that like we're gonna do something linearly. I find it kind of interesting that like if you try to do an attack, like 1 damage does 1, costs 1 mana, and so on. I find it kind of interesting that like no matter what you use, it'll always equal out to 4. Like 2, you do deal 2 damage in 2 turns, and then you'll get to 4. It'll just cost 4, and it's like I don't know. I'm just thinking like it's kind of funny to me that like 4, like if you go linearly, 4 is probably just the best option because 5 would be going overkill, and you need 2
Yeah.
turns to do the other.
That's another really good point. That if you already have a skill that deals 4 damage, what's the benefit of dealing 5 damage? Is there an in-game benefit to casting a 5 damage skill over a 4 damage skill when all enemies have 4 hit points? 1 and 2?
I'm thinking, if it was me making this, I'd make 1 not cost anything, I'd make a cantrip.
Yeah, okay.
And then it would be 4, 6, 8, and then it would be 10 for 5.
4, 6, 8, 10 at that point. Interesting. So why would you choose the 2 cost damage, 2 turns, over the... So your options at that point are kind of the 2 damage cantrip, in which case it takes 3 turns to defeat an enemy. Or you go 2 cost, which is 8. But you might as well do the 4 for 8 at that point, because you do the same damage over a single turn.
2 cost is 4.
That's what you said, right? You said the one damage skill is free, and then 2 cost was 4, and then 6, and then 8.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, so the player wouldn't really have a reason to cast the 2 cost skill. You're either using the cantrips. The 2 cost could save you 1 turn if that's all the mana you had left, instead of 4 straight cantrip. So it's better in that case. But if you have the mana to cast the 4, you're never going to cast the 2 and 2. You would always want to cast the 4.
My initial thoughts was at least start it off linear, and then to me, I'm still thinking there's a whole bunch of other factors that factor in, but like that would go exponential based on other factors, as in like access to skills. Like the 5-1 could even be there's a 5 because you're taking on armor and then doing 4, and therefore you give it maybe a little bit more of a mana cost. So it's like a 1 hit kill plus that armor kill, but now you have to do range all your again and have to turns per game.
Interesting. Let's see.
I had a couple
Yeah.
of thoughts. So as I understand it, so the 4 and the 5 are both instant kills, right?
Yes.
Okay. So I think I pretty much agree with what everybody said, and I feel like the main idea behind balancing is like how many turns does it take to kill? So the only other thought I had to add was I think the mana cost, if you cast the 1 damage and the 3 damage, should be the same as if you cast the 2 damage. That was my only other thought. So
Interesting.
give a 5 mana cost to the 1 damage, like a 15 mana cost to the 2 damage, a 25 mana cost to the 3 damage. Because then if you do 25 for 3 damage and then 5 for 1 damage, it's the same as if you had done 15 twice.
Interesting. Very interesting. Other thoughts? Yeah.
So this is like kind of a side note, but like to make the 1 and the 2s more interesting, like I feel like there would need to be like you were saying, like a cantrip to make the 1 free, or like having like a debuff or a support mechanic. That way you can make these choices interesting. Like maybe you want to increase your defense or decrease their defense, you know what I'm saying? And
Yeah,
then those are effective ways to not deal damage, but still
Yeah.
make them lucrative options.
yeah, you can start to balance every other feature that you would want to add to this around this baseline. But the idea is that you have a baseline, and then if you want to increase attack or decrease attack, you can now say, how many turns on average am I saving when I buff a character that I would usually use this on? I can use that in terms of the number of turns I'm saving, in terms of the cost of what is it, how much MP does it take to shave a turn off this fight? And it starts to become, we're going to talk about anchors here momentarily, but you're going to start coming up with an anchor that you can use to design around and keep it balanced. It's like, I'm going to, if this is balanced, then this thing that I'm adding is balanced. If this is balanced, then this thing that I'm adding is balanced. It starts to do that. So in the back, 1, then 2.
I was thinking, without more information about what you're doing with it, then it's kind of hard to answer the question, because
Yeah.
you could have a scenario where maybe the character unlocks the skill that deals 4 damage first, but it costs so much mana to cast it that it's basically useless. And then when you unlock one that does 1 damage, you can do that one all the time, and that one might be more valuable.
Yeah, there's always systems at play like that. I am assuming for this exercise that the player has access to all of these abilities from the get-go, but then you could start to gate. If you would want to make one a more interesting or a better choice, you could unlock that later on. That starts to make earlier decisions obsolete. But at that point, you might as well remove the option to do it from the game, because if it's obsolete and the player shouldn't pick it, don't really make it an option, because then it's not an interesting decision that the player can make. Yeah, that is a good point.
That's sort of what my question was, because I was thinking about what I said about the 0, 2, 4, 8. And my initial thought process, I think it should cost 8 damage. It costs 8 mana to kill this guy.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
Um,
but it's not the only variable. It's not just mana. There's time and there's turns, and the more turns, the more damage you're taking in from your enemy. So we have to somehow balance all of that together so that it evens out.
Kind of like,
Too.
yeah, I kind of figure out designing around, oh yeah, why would I have something that would do 5 damage if I assume that's gonna be 4 health every time? It's like, oh, maybe you could get gold. Sometimes there's a chance of getting gold from killing an enemy, and if you go for the overkill, maybe there's a chance of getting more.
Interesting. Yeah, you could absolutely add that into it to make an interesting decision about casting a 5 mana skill or a 5 damage skill, sorry. Because right now they look equivalent when all enemies have 4, but why is that 5 damage skill in the game at all if it's just always going to one-shot something? Make a mechanic that makes it worth spending the extra mana to cast that to get an additional reward. But you have an excess of mana, you can turn that into another currency that has value. I like that.
Mainly, I just want to kind of highlight how I like the damage where it's obviously 2, 1, 2, and 3 you can do 2 plus 2 and 3 plus 1 to deal the same amount of damage. And I just find that kind of fascinating, because it's well, how do you balance 2, 1, 2, and 3? Because 2 plus 2 is you're doing the same thing twice, but then 1 and 3 it's well, how do you balance that? Because what if 3 is somehow more efficient because 1 doesn't cost anything, or how do you balance that? I don't know. I'm thinking a lot
it
about
becomes very complicated very quickly. What if the enemy has a skill that costs 1 hit point to cast? If you do the 3 damage up front, now that 1 HP ability kills the creature, so you've effectively locked it from doing that, which would mean there's value to doing the 3 before the 1. But if that's not possible, then it doesn't matter. It's commutative in that it doesn't matter the order that you cast them in.
Yeah, I guess something I want to.
You're good.
Do one more thing.
Yeah.
I guess the thing I'm trying to think about here is what if in a situation in a theoretical game, what would be the reason you'd want to rush someone? I guess you say you deal the 3 damage so that you can put them in a bad spot immediately, or try to scare them instead of just doing two or 1 to set them up.
Yeah, there are plenty of reasons. If they have a healing skill and you want them to spend their mana on a healing skill instead of a damaging skill, you could force them to do that early on with your damage. Spread the damage out that they're going to deal to you over more turns. It becomes the strategy that's embedded within what's embedded in the game. But I think we're trying to make this more complicated than its baseline, because you can always add more layers to something, but it needs to start out as a base idea that you can balance very easily, and then you can start adding the complexity to that. It's very easy to jump into the player's skin here and say, well, this is boring. I'm going to turn this into something that's interesting and fun by adding a bunch of mechanics to it from a designer's perspective. Then give it like a minimum viable product or like a prototype. We need to have the bare bones system in place and not just have a bunch of ideas that we want to all make work together, because that's going to be a very multi-dimensional problem that we have to solve when we try to go balance it all. And that's going to be much more difficult than starting with something that wouldn't be fun to play, coming up with a baseline and then adding pieces around it that turn it into something that's more fun to play.
I think if that's the case, and we're doing the bare minimum of just balancing what's right in front of us here, I would just say we don't need the 5 or 5.
Yeah. What is the purpose of it being there?
Yeah.
Or cost it the same as the 4.
Yeah.
It's an equivalent spell for all intents and purposes. Yeah. So it's worth thinking about just kind of what math did we come up with. It seems like we could poke holes in most linear ideas, although the idea of a free baseline amount of damage per second or damage per turn was a good idea. There should be a baseline. You shouldn't not be able to deal damage because you don't have mana. But make that default amount of damage a low amount of damage, and you can increase the damage that you deal if you have the resource to spend to temporarily deal more damage. That's really what mana is doing in this case. When we perfectly follow a formula, there may be particular situations, especially edge cases. If it's a level formula, the level 1 to level 2 formula, the level 99 to level 100 formula, where the formula needs tweaking. And this is where it doesn't pay off to strictly follow a particular mathematical function because it is exactly that mathematical function. This is where we want to listen to our players' feedback that says, the grind here at the end is ridiculous. I hate it. Listen to that and don't just say, well, it fit the mathematical formula that I designed to fit that. You're wrong. At the same time, if in your tutorial, you're not giving enough experience in order to level them from 1 to 2, and you want them to experience a level up in the tutorial, then you can force the hand of level 1 to 2 is exactly the experience that the tutorial gives you, without then making it seem like, well, the tutorial gave me 70 experience for that quest, and now every quest that I do from here on out gives me 4 experience. What the heck? That's just a fit of mathematical formula. The player will recognize that. So it makes more sense for level 1 to level 2 to be 5 experience. And then that's just the exception to your formula for the level curve for the rest of the game. Just because then the player can attach themselves to an immersion breaking amount of experience given. So in general, make special cases for extremes, because again, it's about the player's experience. So yeah, early leveling, approaching a level cap, mentioned that. You can place hard caps to prevent players from reaching the extremes. So something like, by the time you hit a particular level, everything gives you 1 experience at this point. And that way, it's an immense grind for a level and it quickly becomes impossible to level further. Or you can just say there is a level cap. Once you reach this level cap, you cannot continue to gain experience. All right, time for a fun activity. We like fun activities in here. A version of you has come up with the next great idea for an idle game. And this is going to be a spreadsheeting exercise. So hopefully you all have computers, and if you do not, then we can think about this or even work in pairs with someone who does have a computer. Here is the great idea that you came up with. Congratulations, it's really cool. So in this idle game, you start out by gaining 1 gold per second. At any point during any one of these seconds of elapsed time, the player can purchase small gold mines for 15 gold that increase your rate of gold gain by 1 gold per second. Medium gold mines for 100 gold, increasing your rate of growth, your rate of income by 5 gold per second. Large gold mines cost 300, increasing your income by 20 per second. Huge, massive, alchemical. But as you purchase more and more of the same kind of mine, the cost of the next of that kind of mine increases. It multiplies by 10%. So the rate of growth is 1.1 to the end, where n is the number of that mine that you own. So first small gold mine costs 15 gold. The next one costs 15 times 1.1 is 16.5, and you're going to round regularly. So don't take a floor or a ceiling, but round mathematically. So rounds up to 17. Next costs 15 times 1.1 squared equals 18.15. Okay, we are taking the ceiling. Never mind. It's always the ceiling. It's the next integer up. So that will cost 19, etc. So does the idea of the game make sense? You have a tick speed of 1 second. You're going to gain the amount of gold that is all of the mines that you own on each one of those ticks. And then at any one of those seconds, the user can purchase a mine, and on the next tick, that mine starts producing the resources that it produces. And you update the cost for the next one of those mines based on the purchase that just happened. Any clarifying questions on this very, very basic incremental game? All right, so open a spreadsheet app. In that spreadsheet, we are going to simulate this game. We're not actually going to create the game to be played, but we want to determine whether the purchase prices, the mathematical function for this, and how much gold we can expect the player to have after a period of time. So we're going to simulate playing this game. Here's how we're going to do it. In column A of a spreadsheet app, you're going to have the time elapsed in total seconds. This is going to be the row number. So the first row will be 1 second into the game. The second row will be 2 seconds into the game. The third row will be 3 seconds into the game. Column B is the current amount of gold, not the cumulative amount of gold acquired, but when you purchase a mine, the current gold goes down by the cost of the mine. Columns C through H will be the number of each type of mine owned by the player. Column I, the player's current income. So how much should they be gaining on the next tick, the next second completion? Columns J through O will be the current cost of purchasing one additional mine of that type. So C will match to J, being the small gold mine. D will match to K, being the medium gold mines, etc., until you reach H and O, being the alchemical gold mines. Columns P through U will be calculated as the number of mines of each type that the user is going to purchase on this tick. So based on some calculation, we'll want to determine via some mathematical relationship, what mines do we want to purchase this second? Kind of assume that the player at this point is a machine and it's paused long enough for them to make a decision about the number of mines they want to purchase, and then those purchases go through and the next second elapses. So this will be how we play the game. So on second one, we're going to make decisions through these columns P through U, and then that will carry through to the second row. The second row is going to update the value. We're going to make decisions about that in columns P through U and update to be second 3, etc. So you could play the game this way, very boring way to play the game. But what's going to become the challenge, and this is something that we're going to be working on over the next couple days, kind of just on the side of what we're doing in class. We'll continue with some other class material, but I'll expect that this is going to become an on-the-side assignment for you to submit. And I think that in general, I've historically given some extra credit for this. It's not something that I'm forcing everyone to turn in, but it's very useful to do. So go up to at least 900 rows of this, which is the first 15 minutes of gameplay. And you don't have to manually play this through 900 rows. Please don't. I value your sanity. After you set up this system, what I want you to do is come up with formulas for columns P through U to optimize playing the game. This is some way of saying, based on the values in the other columns, come up with formulas for those columns that determine the appropriate number of mines to purchase based on their current cost, based on your current goal, based on your current income. So outcome number one, the questions that I want to ask are, if you play this game optimally, what is the amount of gold that you have? Sorry, what are the numbers of mines? What is the mine distribution that you own at the end of 15 minutes? Question number two is, if you care about the amount of current gold that you have, what is the maximum amount of current gold that you could have at the end of 15 minutes? So eventually you want to switch from purchasing mines to pocketing gold so that you can have the most gold that you can have at the end of 15 minutes. Those are my two important balance questions that I would like people to answer. So if you submit this, and I would like everybody to submit this because I think it's very useful to do, then those are the two questions I want answered. Maximum number of mines that you can purchase.
I'll be honest, we don't have how to set up this spreadsheet.
There may be some research involved in this to figure out how to use spreadsheet programs if you haven't used spreadsheet programs before. But in this case, it's much better than trying to program this. You could attempt to program this, but I will guarantee you that if you are even slightly versed in a spreadsheet application, it's much easier to visualize all of the data, make small changes to this, and test things out very quickly and easily in a spreadsheet program compared to writing the program for it.
These slides posted.
Probably not yet, but I will post them after class. So now instead of manually entering values, you're using a formula. Your goal is to come up with the formulas that answer those questions. So I will give extra credit to those who come up with the best formulas. That is for sure. So I think maybe that's what I did. I had everybody submit this, but you will get extra credit if you can come up with formulas that beat other people's formulas in the class. So highest gold per second at the end of 15 minutes and the most owned gold at the end of 15 minutes. So maximize income, maximize gold. Yeah.
And income just means gold per second.
Yeah. Yeah. So one's the derivative of the other, but the formula that maximizes one won't necessarily lead to the formula that maximizes the other. In fact, they're very different. So very interesting idea. I love this just as a design exercise, and even for something that is a relatively simple incremental like this, it leads to some complexity in this. You can lean into trying to map this to existing mathematical functions. You can devise your own custom function for how you want to decide to purchase mines or decide when to stop purchasing mines. You could write a program to simulate that if you wanted to help you come up with that formula. Any questions on this task/activity? I kind of want to spend the last 14 minutes of class or so getting this set up. So it looks like we have just about enough laptops in here for every other person at a minimum. So if you don't have a computer with you, find someone next to you who does, and then have them share the work you do together by the end of class with you at the end of class. So feel free to pair up and start to design this and think about it together. Even if you have a computer and you're sitting next to people who have computers, feel free to put your minds together and start talking about this and thinking about this. But let's get this process started.
I would just
I ask you the question, I guys like some of the change stuff, like the program stuff.
take me to wherever it is. And then this one is something like this. All the way down. So. If you wanna equation, just think it's like we can stuff like that.
It's up and see. And it's like highlight red equals one, equals row.
Right, and for me, I did the A2.
Which was the one prior. This is because of off by one. That's one that is better. So you're gonna drag it all the way down.
So then once.
So, where?
So.
Anyone want some help getting set up?
I just.
Yeah.
You'll go there, you'll see. Skills for. I really am trying to figure out how I get all this stuff to.
So in A, you have the same number, so it's, yeah, I think, if you put your cursor on each end. And then your function bar to say. Equals A, but then it's equals A1 plus 1.
You still pass it.
And now it's just click on that two again. And now it's one circle plus
These circles and then just drag it out.
yeah, drag all the way down to 9.
Current goal bar, is that just like any number or then just like?
So you start out by gaining 1 gold per second.
So is it just like the same number, but it's like, copy it over. So here, I'm just gonna do is it's like copy it, so it's.
The current goal, if you want to calculate the current goal that you have, it's going to be the goal you had
So.
in the last second,
Okay, that's gold.
plus all of the gold that your gold mines produced that turn. So you want your baseline on second one, you have 1 gold, but on turn 2, you're going to have basically equals B1 plus.
And then like, is it like this is where the math comes in?
Yeah, you're gonna start saying the number of small gold mines times 1, plus the number of medium gold mines times 5, and that column for each one of the mines you own is gonna be C3.
At least that. Now it's assume on the
Current
next thing is
gold,
like.
higher plus the gold you
Just
need
buy small.
Okay, so
minus any that you purchase.
Oh, okay, so for everything, so this part is gonna be like.
So B is actually one of the more complicated ones to calculate.
Yeah.
It's maybe better to do C through H, I, J, and then come back to B once you have that idea.
Okay, gotcha. So like, okay, so then C through H is the number of each type of mines, is it, do I need to do anything else or is it?
Starting with 0, but it's gonna be an important part of.
Is, yeah, so
that.
just the number. Do I need to do any math with like, what's the math I need to do with C and H, because it sounds like I just like plug out numbers.
Yeah, so the player's current income is going to be the number of each type of mine that player owns times the amount of their that produces per second.
Cause
And
then.
that's be I. the current
Yes, cause
income.
then once we have that, we can just pull out that
Okay,
high.
so.
that.
Okay, so I is like just every type of mine you own, just
Yeah.
multiply by.
E times 1 plus E times 5.
Here. C.
So I think you want to start with 0. On the very first one, in the very first second, you have 0.
Yeah.
But when you calculate for the next one,
Oh.
so I2, instead of I1 should be, you gain, at the start of the game, the player gains 1 gold per second. So have I1, the player's current income at time 1 be.
That'll be kind of last too though.
No, it's just, it's one part of it. Oh, crap. And then like everything says.
From turn 2 on, so you're going to say that your current income is the number of each type of mine that player owns. So to calculate the current income, you're gonna go, yeah, back to the prior second. So you're gonna be, yeah, you're gonna be looking at C1, C1, E1, etc. And you're going to come up with a formula that calculates the current income based on the number of those mines. It's gonna start out with 0, but once you accrue enough, then you're gonna start making decisions about purchasing some of these in ways that.
Do I need to have something where, like it's specifically like. Is there a way to like specifically single out this one? Oh, worried about like this only referring to C1 or something like that.
What's nice is when you refer to C1, it refers to, it knows the relative position, so it will drag down to that relative position.
So you just assume. Okay, that shouldn't be the first. So first we go. So that's second. Alright, so that shouldn't be that bad.
No.
Is the time
One.
small? All the same.
Yeah, for 1 second slaps. Current goal.
That's the cumulative.
I guess
amount of time
I
that
could
basically the game was so
So what would have been small? Small, like mine.
yeah, you start out with the okay, no ones.
And then
I will start out gaining one gold.
you said.
So at 15.
And 15 seconds with acquired enough gold for super small us.
Right.
And if you do that, you'd be gaining 2 gold per second.
Same.
But you would start with 0 gold, the next turn you have 2, the next turn you have 4, the next turn you have 6.
No, the previous.
So are we, so, nice,
And then one side.
To create formulas.
One
You're trying to create formulas for playing. If you wanted to play the game, then you would be going and editing each row. And you would bring row to row the game. But why is there, you want to come up with a formula? Why isn't this one for each? It says, how many lines do we want to purchase? It's because it's on this base line. One thing's like.
Oh,
Well,
This should be one.
It should, this should be what's the cost of each line is, given the number of lines that we have, or and that's gonna change on a second by second basis, which lines we want to purchase. Whether we can purchase any lines.
Oh, okay.
Is there, can you give an example, like what some of those formulas?
Ah.
Yeah, so if we're going to purchase a mine of some kind, we would wanna know how much gold we have available. That's our current goal. So we wanna check if the current goal is greater than the amount of cost of each one. That tells us whether we can purchase at least one of it.
Yeah.
We can divide it, current goal divided by the number of.
Like you literally just sort of beat half of together time or something like that. Zero bidding you want to use. Yes, we can.
So I would do. Or how many you could purchase. And from there, you could come up with a value. That tells you something like, what is the gold gained per cost? So if I purchase a smaller gold line, let's say that I've saved up 100 gold.
Okay.
And I have 0 of every time.
Right.
If I spent 15 gold on a small gold line, I would be gaining 1 extra gold per second.
Oh.
From a 15 gold investment.
So does it like?
So that ratio is 1/50. I could also get some medium gold line. That would increase my gold by 5 gold per second at a cost of 100. So one value you might have yourself to as well, I would be getting 5 gold per second at a 100 gold cost, 5 over 100.
Oh,
I did 2 columns.
2 columns.
1 over 15 is bigger than 1 over 20. So it makes more sense. I'm making a better investment by purchasing a small gold line than a medium gold line.
Well, we could start from 0. Yeah.
But-
So.
Does that matter on a turn by turn basis? This gets relatively complex and maximize, which is why there's extra credit for the maximize. But if you want to go need formula first, you can start.
Yeah, no, this makes sense then.
Look at other kinds of just an alchemical. If you could purchase an alchemical gold line, with an alchemical gold.
For time costs.
Yeah, cost of purchase.
Yeah.
Current goal is.
So current goal is just.
Yeah.
Current goal.
Well, we're gonna go a lot.
Plus.
So
What if we go to 2?
When I have a second, sorry,
And it is generating the gold salary.
It's really. The gold salary increases when you purchase
In a
it.
second, there's 0.
yeah, and then it starts, would that be like?
So. Yeah, when you do it, it's not like apply your. So now the cost of your second is small for your own. Is that what you're doing? Yeah. Once you have 18, then you want to purchase one.
Reference.
But the idea is you should have a formula that calculates this based on the values of the previous row. So when you do something like enter down here, you enter, I want to purchase one of these, auto update the next row with all that.
And then.
Yeah, that's the assignment. So start with column C for each, the number of each type of wine that player wants. So on their first row, on the first stack of the game, you own 0 of each of those wines.
Right. Those are these.
And if you don't choose to purchase, when we say something like columns P through U or the number of wines that each type purchase this stack.
Yeah.
So if you only have one, just under one, on second one, you can't afford it. So if we wanted to figure out how many of each type of wine you own, C for H on row two, look at column P through U.
But in this exact second, obviously it should.
To determine what
This exact second should still.
Or just save for medium.
So we did.
that's the number of wines purchased in the second.
So
So very,
Yeah.
very first round of the game, you have one goal, and you have no wines. You don't have enough gold to purchase any of the wines of this type. So to update the number of wines owned in the second row, you're gonna take the number of wines owned in the second one, which is a bunch of zeros. And the number of wines purchased in that first second, 0, add them together, and that becomes the number of wines owned in second 2.
Yeah, 15.
Okay, so column C plus column P is column C in the next second.
Yeah, you have 15. Discount.
Okay, we're good.
So are there any ones that discount like that?
You can continue that process until you have enough gold to be able to afford a wine. And then when you type something in a column that you review, it will auto update the number that owns, the number of wines that you own. Then the number of wine that you own changes your income, because you own more wines, you need more income. As you gain more income, that is fed into your current goals on the next second. So everything auto updates if you set up the formulas correctly, so that when you make decisions in columns P through U, the next second's values start updating.
1.12.
Yeah, another one. Multiplied by that.
Okay, so let's do that. Equals
Go 16.5.
1.1. See.
We
Okay.
can figure out.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
Is there, don't you have something programmed here where it's like, if you have, where it's like, if you can buy one, you will go for it or something like that?
Yeah, so eventually, when you're making these formulas, the formulas are going to be what comes in columns P through U. This is how you're automating the game. If you're gonna write a bot for this game, or an AI for this game of some kind, and it's gonna be formulas in P through U. So your task is to determine, the logic that goes in columns P through U that maximizes either your current gold at the end of the game or your current income at the end of the game. So you either wanna maximize column B or column I. There'll be different functions that you use for column P through U that will either maximize this or maximize that. At column 9. You're gonna look at column 900 at that value. And we're gonna see whose spreadsheets can come up with the maximum value.
Okay, yeah. I got some of the program like, which is I'm trying to figure out like.
That's like the 7th
Kind of like, it's like.
Yeah, yeah.
Because it's like, okay, so. Okay, and then if current, well, I haven't gotten current goal, I haven't gotten current 16.
Grab, so I think we want to.
Or should it's.
Yeah, I guess it's just like, or with my first things. Like, I got the J through O should be all set up. I'm not sure how he through O works, something where like, is there something where it's like, if you can buy right now, I could buy it now.
That is a baseline formula that you could use.
Oh, I need to figure out like.
Yeah, this will be for creativity to determine what's put there. So that you'd access this. You could either play it manually, where you second by second go through and decide, can I purchase this? What would I do, given the knowledge that's on the rest of the row?
Yeah.
Or,
Okay, so this is like where the programming thing comes in.
Yeah.
Right, it's like if you
yeah,
like if you can get this one, just add more to this one, or just fun again, like so if you can get like just maximize all our favorites.
yeah. How would we do that?
Okay, so
And alas, we are already out of time. We'll take a little bit of time at the start of tomorrow's class. So my recommendation for people is please work on this a bit between today and tomorrow. Get stuck. bring a laptop to class tomorrow and I can help you get unstuck. But we won't spend a ton of time on it because I want to get to the next things. This will become something that you do for fun at home. But yeah, I at least want to make sure that we're all on the same page. We can at least get started. We understand how to use a spreadsheet program enough to get this working.
Spreadsheet was my favorite. Oh, yes. You'll just crazy.
I find that computer scientists underutilize spreadsheet programs because we think that we can write programs for everything, but it turns out that there's still a use for them.
Not that you guys that are not useful, just because I need them.
Yeah. They're super useful once you know how to use it.
Well, my friend is an accountant.
Oh.
He uses a spreadsheet program all the time.